We have many local groups, I know in Florida and elsewhere, and I know Marlene's very active in this, that are doing just that. There's a group in Florida called the Florida Immigrant Coalition. They go into these detention centers, they learn what the problems are, and they meet with their members of Congress and other elected officials to try to push their agenda and make sure that their concerns are being heard. You know, the United States has the world's highest incarceration rate, and ICE detainees represent the fastest growing prison population in the United States. I think at last count I'm hearing it's going to be about something like 440,000 ICE detainees this year. Clearly, you know, if you're talking about medical care, ICE officials can't keep pace. When you were asking a question earlier, the reporter, about, you know, the cost, let me tell you who's making a lot of money if you want to invest in a good stock. Try the GEO Group, try Correctional Corporations of America. Their stock went through the roof a few years ago when President Bush announced that we were going to be incarcerating a lot more ICE detainees. So I'm very encouraged, frankly, that so many local groups, you know, it's very difficult for them to do because a lot of folks who are even here legally are afraid to complain. The fear in immigrant communities in Florida, I can tell you, is palpable. Immigrant families are being forcibly separated overnight. Moms are being torn from their young children. We represented one young mother. She and her family was picked up by local police, stopped for a traffic violation, not even given a traffic ticket. Mom ended up in 3 different jails, including 2 in Texas. Dad taken to one facility, mom to another. 2 children put in foster care, even though she had a lawful permanent resident sister here, able to take care of them. For 2 months, while she was in jails in Texas, this mom had no idea where her 2 young boys were. They had no idea where their mom was. When they finally saw her, they were so traumatized. They thought their parents had deserted them. They thought their mother had committed murder because she was in a prison uniform in a jail. I mean, you know, to be doing this kind of thing in the United States of America is not only unacceptable, I mean, it's beyond shameful. But these are the kinds of stories we hear every day. And I think as we hear more of these stories, the families in these local communities are getting more involved and standing up and being counted and trying to make a difference.
Can I just I just wanted to address, in San Francisco, when we were there, we did a good bit of work in San Francisco and New York. We met with Lauria's Committee for Civil Rights, which had filed civil actions against the Department of Homeland Security. I believe it was related to wrongful death, and they actually prevailed. I think it was the first civil favorable decision on behalf of people who had been in immigration detention, and they were, of course, looking at to figure out how do they collect. So there's just another example of there is some sort of litigation going on, which of course is also being done in other parts of the country.
Can I ask one question? Two things. In New York, there's an organization that I actually had the pleasure of helping to start years ago called Families for Freedom. And Families for Freedom is a defense network for immigrants who are facing deportation. And their interesting, very local contribution to a national immigration debate is to demand justice for immigrant families in deportation. So it's, you know, obviously people who suffer through conditions of detention and wanting to fix up issues of medical neglect, often through individual advocacy, but it's also, for example, pushing for legislation like the Child Citizen Protection Act, which was introduced by Jose Serrano. Because part of the problem is that our deportation system is a set of mandatory minimums, right? So you have mandatory detention where upwards of 87% of people detained right now in immigration custody have never had a bond hearing. These are people that have never gone before a judge to ask for bond because they're not eligible by the 1996 statute. So then apart from detention, you have mandatory deportation where you could, for example, be the mother of 5 American-born children, have lived in this country for 15, 20, 30 years, but have no eligibility for a pardon once you get into the immigration court. So I think that we're also seeing through a lot of, you know, grassroots and local advocacy, local family impacts, and interfacing with community organizations, a real redefinition of the immigration debate and what needs to happen under comprehensive reform.
Great. It's closing in on 10:30, so I'd like to thank all of our panelists, but I'd also like to thank the Rights Working Group staff led by the Executive Director, Margaret Long. Thank you for coming, and I believe that our panelists, at least some of them, will be able to be around if you have more questions. Thank you very much for coming.